Okay, hello everybody. This is a video. We'll call it Tales from the Farm, a special edition. Today is August 26th. It's about 4:15 in the afternoon. And first thing I'll say is please ignore this hat. I'm kind of backed in the corner here of my room here, and I got a light and a tripod and stuff in front of me, and I this is the only thing I had, and I didn't want my bald head shining on the light to have a glow off the light to blind the camera. But I'd like to talk about Uncle Jim Richardson. He recently passed away, and Jim lived to be 88, and I guess he had a somewhat of a little bit extended illness. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but we won't dwell on that. But what I'd like to do is like to document here, and just kind of, there's some memories that I have now that my brother Larry's gone. I'm the only child of John Richardson's that would know this stuff, so I wanted to make sure that Frank and Tom and Beth and Teresa and Cindy, I think is there another one? Heck, I don't know how. I was just at the visitation, and I think that Frank and Tom and Beth. Yeah, there's 5. Okay. Anyway, what amount 5 of you kids? Anyway, I'm put this up on YouTube for y'all to see, and put it on the Descendants site. But like anything else, my earliest recollection of Uncle Jim was at the Richardson family reunions that we had up here at Paxton at St. Mary's Hall. And Jim would always bring his guitar, and I can remember being like 6 years old, and Jim had this, I think he still got it, this old Shure type microphone, and he would plug that into that Fender old tan colored Tolex covered Fender amplifier in that, and when I was 6 years old, I was into Johnny Cash. Excuse me. My mom was into the Carter family, and she played guitar and that, and Jim had gotten Larry a old K-type electric guitar and a silver tone amp. I think it had a 10-inch speaker in it, and I had one much of an amp back then, but it was a lot back then because it was tube type and had 3 knobs on it, and it was in the 60s and 70s. That was something, for a couple kids out on the farm. Anyway, Jim would bring his guitar to the family reunions, and we'd have a jam session. That and that was kind of gave me my earliest bearings to that, and my mom. And Larry picked up how to play the guitar somewhat, and I always knew that I wanted to play music from that point, and Jim was a big influence on that. And I'll just go for the record saying if it hadn't been him, my mom, my brother Larry, Johnny Cash, and Elvis Presley, that basically shaped my 40 years of musical career per se. And I went as far as anybody could and stay local. I got to play with some Country Music Hall of Fame members and people. One got to play with Red Volkart. He was at one time toured with Merle Haggard as his lead guitar player for years and years and years. But that's neither here nor there. We'll get back to that. I remember, and my dad, getting back to the farm here, my dad would hire Jim occasionally to do a few projects on the farm here and there. And one time, Dad needed a well house built because that was the days before we had a well that had a submergible pump that you didn't need none of that for because it was below ground. The pump was above ground, and in the winter it would freeze up. So Jim come out to our farm, and we had just started, we're going to start grade A milk. I think that's the time when Larry had just close to graduating from out of high school, and him and Dad got into the milk and cow business. I think Dad translated from the hog business for a while, and then he needed a well house built. And I remember Jim had it was either 67 through 70, one of the two, what year it was, but he was driving he just started up pretty much, gotten in with Kenny Medler, and just had started M&R Builders at the time on his own. And this truck, it had a white cab top, and it was like a brownish gold color. And Jim was, I don't think he even had a camper top on it at the time, but Jim was driving that, and he'd hauled the lumber and stuff, and he built a well house for us out there on the farm. Well, matter of fact, he built two. He built one over at the McCabe place where my Uncle Bob was farming the ground. He built one over there, but he built the one at our house, and I kind of got to hang around him and kind of be his little helper, which I never did much. I mean, I was only 6 or 7, but it just the idea of, you know, he took part in me, and he was he was being a real uncle, I'll put it that way. And I'll never forget that. And, you know, since then there's been numerous jam sessions and that, like at the VFW and the Rantoul, and well, we had there. I remember there's one, and I've got pictures somewhere. There was one that was up at Ludlow, and Kathleen and Barbara and Grandma. The stupid phone. I'd like to. I'll shove it under the pillow. Anyway, it'll quit soon. What it amounts to, there it quit. What it amounts to, I've got pictures somewhere to show it, but it was in the garage at Grandma Mabel and Kathleen and Barbara's house. There was a jam session up there that they had. I don't know what the occasion was. I know it was I know it was in warmer weather when we had it, but like I said, excuse me a minute here. I'm not sure the occasion that it happened, but you know, like I said, a lot of fond memories of Uncle Jim like that. And you know, Jim kind of had an ornery side to him, and I'll try to keep this PG rating. Jim would get tickled about stuff, and I know. Well, Jim had come up to Ludlow at the bar where the Benas owned, Jim Bena, and Jim and Carla Bena own it. And I'd done karaoke in there for him last spring of my last part of my musical career there for 10 years. And one time Jim come up there, and we used to have help. Their last name was Richardson too. No relation, by the way. But they were from descendants from Kentucky too. Bud and Carol Richardson, which they were brother and sister. And well, Bud was mentally challenged, let's say. He couldn't read or write and that, but Dad took him in, well, Grandpa Frank Richardson and my dad, well, Bud and Grandpa Frank, they were best buddies to my knowledge. And Dad took Bud in on the farm and taught him how to drive a tractor and stuff like that. And Bud was a good farmhand. And Carol, his sister, she babysit me when I was real young, and my mom was in the hospital and stuff, and Dad and the hired help had to work out in the fields and stuff. But anyway, background on, that's enough of the background on that, but let's just say that Jim come up there and we got to talking about old times at Ludlow in front of Jim Bina after I was done for the evening karaoke. Jim got so tickled talking about Bud and Carol because let's just say they had more than more than a normal. They were a lot closer than your usual brother and sister type. Okay? And Jim got laughing about that. And he just, I mean, Jim got rolling laughing. He did laugh, he was like my dad when he'd get to laughing, he couldn't stop laughing, and tears come off his eyes and stuff like that. And I think that's a Richardson thing because I do the same thing, and I know my brother Larry did it too. But anyway, I remember stuff like that, and there is another thing, another time. I'm not doing this in any chronological order. Well, I'm trying to, but as stuff comes into my head here, this is not scripted by any means. So if the events get not in order that they happened, bear with me. But I remember it was the Christmas after my Uncle Bob died. And Bob passed away, I think it was middle of November, if I'm not mistaken. And every year after midnight mass, I was there for one year. I know that, and Jim and I went and had a little jam session down in his basement. But this was the year after my Uncle Bob passed away, and they all went to St. Elizabeth's for midnight mass, and then everybody'd go over to Jim and Gertie's house. Well, the year after Bob died, apparently Jim asked my dad, he said, "You got to help me out." My dad was married to Diva, and they lived at Triangular Trailer Court, Fountain Valley now at the time, so it wasn't very far to Thomasboro. And anyway, Jim invited him and Diva to his house. Apparently there was a tradition where they made fresh sausage, and my Uncle Bob would be always the one to season it. Well, my dad was invited in Bob's place to season the sausage that year. I don't know if some of you kids remember that or not, but a lot of stuff like that. And for me, this really brings back a lot of memories and stuff. And we all make mistakes in life, and wish I'd have done this if I hadn't have done that, and that type of thing. And, like I said, my purpose of doing this is to document stuff that no one else would know or might not remember. And I was glad to get to go this last Sunday, and I just I'll just conclude this by saying there have been reasons I won't get into for dissing myself from family reunions and stuff like that. But I just wish that, I'm not going to say that I wish I hadn't done that, but I'll just say that you guys, Uncle Jim was not one of the reasons that I have stayed away. Let's put it that way. Another thing too. I don't know if some of you knew it or whatnot have you, but Jim's partner, Kenny Medler, he had a brother, and I'm sure you know the boys and stuff, y'all or all the kids know who Sam Medler is, Kenny's brother. He was my boss at the Rantoul Press for a couple years, and I worked on and off on his crew on the web printing press. Our main job was we printed the Daily Illini newspaper, and I would catch the paper off the press, and then I would deliver that. But that's kind of another off left field here, but that's kind of another connection I had indirectly with Jim. And Sam and I, we would have a lot of conversations about Jim and this and that and the other things, and on our lunch breaks. And Sam was just as ornery as the rest of them, you know. But and back then, let me just say, back then, everything, if a boss would say to a coworker today what they did back then, there'd be lawsuits and everything and stuff like that. And back then, we didn't think nothing about stuff like that in that, 30, 40 years ago. That was just a day-to-day thing. And, it's a shame that the that the world has changed to where it's gotten to that point. But I don't get me started on politics and all that, so that's a whole different video. But anyway, the only other thing that I can mention, I think I mentioned it to Tom or Frank. I can remember when Jim would bring the boys out on a Saturday or something to the farm, and they'd play catch with Larry in the front yard, and Larry'd try to burn their hand, throwing at them and stuff and whatnot have you. But I think I've covered everything that I can here, and I hope you guys. I hope this, when you watch this, I hope it brings back a memory or two about your dad. Maybe there's something, one or two things you didn't know. And like I said, I apologize again for the stupid hat I got this. Where this come up from, I played a joke on Levi, and we watched the movie The Sandlot, and Smalls, he wore the fishing hat with the big bill in it, and I got the kid in Levi that I was going to get him, my grandson Levi, that I was going to get him one of these, one just like it, and he said, "No, you're not." Well, I seen him cheap on Amazon, and I ended up buying the stupid thing, and now I'm stuck with it. But that's okay. But what it amounts to, as I was saying, I hope this brings back a memory or two and something that you didn't know, and like I said, a lot of good memories. Jim was a good man, and he had a lot of people that liked him, and he sure will be missed. All right. Thank you very much. Y'all have a good day, and we'll see you in the next one.